For those of you that are coming back, thank you for coming back. I came in and I know we were going to start at 1:30. I said, there's no one here but my good friend from Bound Home. I said, I must have bombed this morning, but then it said it was 1:30. There was a very good flight thing. I had to return some calls. But for those of you who are just joining us, let's go ahead and recap. We had a scenario of Pat Smith, who's an APRN. And Pat Smith worked at a pain management and did some hospice, but she'd been watched for a couple of years. There was an issue of giving Lortab, the Xanax and the Soma combination, or known as the Houston cocktail by some of the DEA. And so they came in and investigated. She had a collaborating physician that was working for her. The collaborating physician has turned state's evidence against her. She's facing criminal, civil, and administrative exposure. One of the other issues that we were talking about were the basics of a civil case, a criminal case, and we talked about how to pick a jury. We talked about how to cross-examine. We talked about evidence, and we talked about the most important thing is you never know what 12 people on a jury are going to do. So we talked about mediation and settlement and compromise. There were very good questions at the break. We had people talk about insurance and how much insurance should I carry. We pretty much agreed together that if you take care of one OB patient, you might as well get the whole family practitioner kind of deal. If you see only adults, maybe stick with them, but there's remote chance to see one pediatric patient a year. It's probably better to do that. We talked about carrying your own insurance as affordable as you can, because you might have to have it portable when you go from one job to another, and also some coverage extended after you leave. I think part of the negotiation as an APRN when you get into the profession is making sure you have adequate coverage. And we also talked about the issue that comes up is who does the attorney represent? Does he represent the nurse, the insurance company, or the practice? And sometimes all three, and that's where you get some issues. And that's why I always say it's best to carry your own insurance. Great questions this morning about can you choose your own lawyer? It depends. On some insurance policies will allow you to say, I want Mr. X as my attorney or Mrs. Y, and then they'll ask why, and you could say, well, you know, I feel comfortable with that person. They may make you pay a deductible. It all depends, and some just let you have your own. I do work with certain insurance agencies like MedPro will generally say we reserve the right to give you a team of attorneys, but if you know of an attorney that's experienced in this area, you can work with them. So, and there's a lot of excellent practitioners that I've known, pharmacists that also are lawyers, and so they handle these kinds of cases. So what we're looking at is this person is looking at the media being involved. They're looking at political things being involved because of the policies on Lortab and prescribing and quote unquote overprescribing. We've seen over the last 20 years that OxyContin, Lortab, things like that were given for pain, and now it's kind of gone full circle. Government, pharmacy, doctors were giving these things, and now they're saying if you give them, you're bad. So a lot of doctors are now going and saying nothing but naproxen and pain management. So this is a kind of ripped off the headlines, as they say, of Law and Order. They say this is the kind of case we're looking at. So now we've evolved from looking at the civil and the criminal, and I'll have a PowerPoint available that you can catch up on if you haven't seen it, for the ones that haven't seen the whole presentation. But we're evolving now into seeing, okay, she faces civil, being sued, people getting hooked on opiates, and people maybe get in the wrong hands because she prescribed the wrong things or had a hand in it at least. And then we were looking at the criminal that DEA is saying she ran a pill mill, gave the same medicine to an 80-year-old, and gave the same medicine to a 250-pound 6-footer, and just indiscriminately gave it. So when we're looking at the BON, as you will see, is going to say you have to tailor your plans for each patient specifically. You can't just blanket give things. This is where these weight loss clinics get into trouble. These are where people that are giving like a certain, when they used to give the fen-phen combo, some of you all may be old enough to remember the fen-phen litigation, where they had these weight loss clinics and giving everything to everybody. Then they got mitral valve problems, they got all these problems and got sued, not only the pharmaceutical companies, but other people, and it created a lot of litigation. So really the BON is looking at patterns like this, and now with EMR and with technology and with DEA taking over, you can really see, you yourself can see who's using your prescriptive authority. In our fact pattern, she discovered that somebody abused her prescriptive authority and it was stolen. But what she failed to do is tell her collaborator in our fact pattern, and she failed to get another number. So those are the things against her. For her were she did ring an alarm bell, and she is saying that her affirmative defense is, I didn't do 90% of these prescriptions. I did not have anything to do with. Plus, I certainly didn't have anything to do with after November of 2014 when they made them Schedule 2, or October rather. So coming back from the break, we're going to be thinking about how all this is going to be evaluated by the BON. They know, and they, for our intents and purposes in our fact pattern, they've gone ahead and they went ahead and did an eminent harm sort of evaluation on her and took away her license. Now we have a couple of weeks where we can ask for a hearing, and we can come back and ask for it, and we have to, it's a burden on us to prove she's not an imminent danger. She deserves to get it back. Plus another argument is, why are you going to cancel her RN and LVN license? In our fact pattern, she carries all three. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China, that she's having an issue with her prescriptive authority when she's an RN and LVN? Maybe because she can still work, and then we can hash it out about the, but the board doesn't look at it that way. They look at it from a public safety issue and say, we can't trust her doing any kind of nursing. So that's what we're kind of looking at. And what we were going to look at before the break was, if you were the lawyer for our APRN, how would you defend her? And those are the kind of things that we're looking at, affirmative defenses. I'm not going to give you the answers. We're going to hash them out. It's easy to convict Pat, but how do we know she wrote all those scripts? Even if she did what she did, what can we do to keep out jailhouse confessions, discredit jailhouse snitches? You know, she was in jail, and in our fact pattern in the morning, and she was on the phone. She told her husband, I did this and that. We're trying to suppress those things from a criminal aspect. And of course, people that are in jail will do anything to get out or lessen their sentence. So what if an APRN is reported to the board? Well, let's use our example and expand on it. Let's use a real life scenario, and what I'm going to do is kind of twist it a little bit. This is an actual case, okay? And what I did was just change the pattern a little bit to, and even though it's a matter of public record, I still don't want to bring out, it wasn't my client, but I still don't want to, you know, bring out names and things like that. But these things are open to the public. As we know, we can go to the site and see who's been dinged, and even with the RN, now it's a centerfold. You get your RN update, it's become a centerfold, right? Used to be 1 or 2 pages, we go, who got busted? That was in the 80s and 90s. And then in the 2000s, then it started folding out. When you got the RN, LPN, and APRN together, it has become, a lot of people are getting sanctioned. And I'll tell you, one of the inside little secrets is because they've given them more funding, and because our leadership has become more conservative in Texas, and because of a third reason, tort reform. You can't sue the doctors, nurses, everybody like you used to. So patients are getting frustrated. What do they do instead of filing lawsuits? File board complaint. Call Medicare, Medicaid, and the internet. They've learned how to look up the internet, and now it's like Travel and TripAdvisor when you go to the hospital. They didn't give me the ice chips when I wanted to. I don't know what MPO means. I was thirsty. What kind of place is this? You know, and you know, lavaging all our gastric content out. You know, and these people are evaluating. A quarter of how we get reimbursed is by these things. So things have evolved. And the way we're treating patients, if you are an APRN in the hospital, how many of y'all are APRNs in a hospital-based practice? There you go. And how many independent, own clinics? How many are collaborating with physicians and have their own clinic? Or combined? Okay. And how about house calls? There you go. Hospice. Okay. All of these, no matter what field you come from, we're looking at this from how are we going to handle pain management. Now, most of us and most of our peers are saying now after 2014, if it's hospice, okay, maybe. I'm going to, you know, but I don't handle the Schedule 2s. I'm nervous about the Schedule 3s. I don't want to look like I give out Tylenol number 3 like candy, or 4. So these are the types of things we're looking at, but they're looking at patterns and trends. Although this example may sound extreme, you might be surprised to know that pain management is only one of the many prime areas for the BON. Health fraud is another area fast approaching those epidemic proportions. Down in the Rio Grande Valley and here in Houston, McAllen and Houston have set up office shops here for FBI, OIG. They work together hand in hand, and they're looking to bust home health primarily, but they're looking at mid-levels, and they're also looking at doctors with re-signing home health certifications, being homebound, all these things. Not just DME anymore. DME was the flavor of the day. Cyber attacks. We've got people losing thumb drives. If you don't have everything encrypted when you walk out of a hospital, if you don't have things encrypted when you walk out of your practice and you take a record home or lose a laptop and it's not encrypted, it's pretty much per se, lawyer term, it's pretty much is malpractice and fines. And then you have to go on the wall of shame. Over there at Health and Human Services has a website, and they put up but don't feel bad, you're in good company. Emory University, somebody walked out with like 1,000 names. And why is this so dangerous? Identity fraud. People will get these names and use them for anything, not just for drugs, but to establish an identity, credit, everything. If it's over 500 patients, you have to publish it publicly. You have to put it on a website. You've got to make a 1-800 number, even under 500. You have to disclose all this. So these other two these are kind of for other days, but I'm just telling you, these are the ones that we're kind of looking at. But for our intents and purposes, the big one right now, the burning issue, is pain management control. First things first is safeguard your practice. As we know, the BON mission is to protect and promote the welfare of people of Texas by assuring that each nurse licensed in Texas practices safely. They say that over and over, and they remind us that, and you hear that BON is not your friend. Well, the BON really, one person brought up in the early morning session that they gave them chances after chances, somebody with a substance abuse problem. They will treat somebody differently with a substance abuse problem differently than somebody with a theft problem, because that goes more towards moral turpitude rather than a substance abuse problem. So they treat each one differently. Right now, pill mill are hot issues, hot button issues right now. Suspension is almost imminent if you get in trouble. Generally, there are 13 members, kind of changes with administration, but representing LVNs and RNs. There are 300,000 plus nurses in Texas. At any one time, about 3 to 5% are being investigated. I used to think it was like as big as the Taj Mahal, over there in the nursing board. Actually, you walk in, it's about 10,000 square feet. You walk in, and they've got offices, 2 to 3 people per cubicle, and they've got paper stacks like this, boxes and boxes of records. That's why they'll investigate you. Average investigation is 6 months to a year, unless it's a hot button political issue. Pain management, healthcare fraud. Those they will go look at them fast. If this is something where you failed to document, if this is something where a patient fell and a family member reported you or something, those go in the back burner. But if it's pain management, they're all over it. And it's right there at the Hobby Building. You have to go in. It's right there on Guadalupe Street. And they've got 95 staff members. They've increased past 100 now. I talked to Dusty Johnson from the board, and they're giving more and more funding. That's why you're seeing the centerfold. They're getting more investigators. Their budget is based on their productivity. So a lot of this, but they have a lot of discretion. They can dismiss claims, but they're dismissing less and less claims. A lot of the time I get status letters, even with the frivolous claims, we're still investigating, be patient with us. And I know a lot of these guys. And somebody asked me, who are the investigators? Are they APRN'S that are investigating APRN'S? No, some of them aren't even nurses. Half aren't nurses. But what they do is, as you will see, they get expert nurses on practice to evaluate us. And that's how they build their case against us. Statutes and rules. LVNs, RNs, and APRNs are required to know and comply with the rules. And that is, we see it, there's like laws and all this, and people have brought up great questions and said, well, I don't have time to do all that, and that's why I'm going to try to give you some shortcuts. Get a copy of your Nurse Practice Act. I will point you to areas that they are looking at for APRNs today. I will point you in areas that you can use this where statutes are promulgated by the legislature. Fancy way to say they make the laws, but they are not nurses. So they tell the nursing board, you guys know what you're doing. Enforce the law through the Texas Administrative Act and also through the Occupational Code. The Nurse Practice Act is developed and shaped by laws and is very detailed. The legislators, and that's why we come in is so important, is we need to let our legislators know what problems we're facing out there. If they don't know, they're going to pass laws that detrimentally affect us. And the authority, as we say it, that's the law. MPA is the law that regulates nursing, and it defines the duties. It gives the BON the authority to do what they do. And here are some of the shortcuts right here. Texas Occupations Code. These are the ones, and I'll make a PowerPoint available to Mr. Rollins there, but we have the APN Compact. We've got the Administrative Code Title 22. That's a big over umbrella of all this. And we can go back through this, and like I said, I'll make it available. And the Administrative Code I use all the time on this, looking for some of the statutes to go through. Some of these are just basic ones that I'll tell anybody from wear your badge. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have your full name. As we know with the internet and Facebook now and stalkers and cyber attacks and things like that, you know, I wear Joe, but you know, it says RNNP. I mean, you know, how many people have you seen with a badge backwards? How many times, you know? So you have to identify yourself. And I'll talk to APRN'S, you know, at the top of the food chain to student nurses and tell them, how do you diffuse situations? You tell them who you are. Nowadays, people don't know if you're the custodian or you're the RN or you're the APRN because everybody wears scrubs. I mean, you walk into a room, you identify yourself, you tell them what you're going to do, you tell them the anticipatory guidelines that are going to follow, and you know, that's one of the things that's a hard and fast rule. Another big one, disciplinary action, how to report a nurse, self-reporting. You know, I've had people self-report TPAP-N, and it's a painful process, but they've done it. Change of address, we talked about this morning. If you can't say, well, I didn't get the letter, I moved, and they'll say, well, that's your problem. You need to tell us when you move because that's our way of communicating with you. And failure to renew license, you'd be surprised how many people forget to renew their license because, you know, I guess they don't want to get older and they forget their birthdays. I stopped counting birthdays at 40, you know. So look at this rule, for instance. 217.11 consists of applicable laws to all nurses, specific to LVNs, there's in there, specific to RNs, RNs with APN status. You can go to that rule and you can look at that. So this is under the Occupational Administrative Code and the Texas Administrative Code. Occupational Code, Texas Administrative Code. These rules here are set up for you to review, and that way when they say, no, the Nurse Practice Act, I'll say, let's save a little time and I'll point you in the right direction. Put up some others and they'll be available, but I'll point to the third one there, 217.11, the scope of practice. Delegation is huge for us. Owning your own practice is a way of not saying owning your own clinic. They're saying own your practice, and they mean by that you can't use the excuse of staffing. You can't use the excuse I was too busy. You can't use the excuse the HMOs are expecting me to see 5 patients an hour. We cannot use those things. We're supposed to, by law, say, look, safe harbor, this is, but if anybody's filled out safe harbor, it's about that thick. There's some shortcuts to alert people, but you have to protect yourself. If you take on an assignment and that assignment is too much for you, this may be detrimental not only to your practice but to the patients. So I would draw your attention to that. Clarifying orders, mandatory reporting. There are some, if you see abuse of the elderly, abuse of children, if you see somebody that is in imminent danger, if it's impaired. The reason they're so hard is, again, like I talked about this morning, we've got about an 86% approval rating. That's why we're the most trusted profession, because I think that's why we're so hard on each other as far as the discipline. The document, remember to write it down. Document, document, document. Phone call is not enough. A lot of the time on scripts and follow-ups, we need to document. With EMR, it's even becoming more important. And know and follow the laws that apply to your practice. And so 217 is a very, very important, as you can see, that area. That saves you some time, because you're going to open it up and go, God, there's so many codes. And I'm trying to bring you to the critical rules and save you about 90% of the time and expense of hunting down your own legal research. And be surprised how many people have called me and said, I already read 217.11A1, Joe, what does it say? And I'll say, let me look. I don't know the code by memory, but let me find out. And there it is, last stats that I got. Nurses 81%, pharmacists 71, not bad. Physicians plummeting, 66. Police officers 57. After Ferguson, maybe a little less. Bankers, and then there I am right here. You see? Yeah, see? And then congressmen, so I feel good. Yeah, my ex associate partner is a congressman. He became congressman for his 50th birthday. Congratulations. We have power. We don't think we have power, but we do. Some days we feel powerless. But look at the power we do have. We have to access personal information. That's why HIPAA is so important. People at their most vulnerable put their trust in us. And we diagnose, prescribe, and treat. And we're responsible for good professional character. And that's why even stealing bubble gum is bad. Professional boundaries, you'd be surprised how many cases that I handle of this, where somebody was an ex-client and they started a relationship with them. Even funerals can be dangerous. Going to the funerals of somebody, when you blur the lines. I've had people go and buy a bag of groceries for somebody, then it became something more different. Nurses are there to help. I had a nurse get disciplined and peer reviewed and reported because of she helped finance a car with a patient so the patient could come and see, and co-signed. And then of course the guy defaulted, and then they got a romantic relationship, and that defaulted, and then he reports her to the board to get even, right? And I said, well, what do you think they're going to think about this? They're going to say, you have to know your professional lines and boundaries, even if it's not sexual, even if it's not romantic. Social media, you have to be very, very careful. There's so many people will try to get, and I love them to death, but they're trying to get free advice in writing on the internet from me on Facebook, and I tell them, give me a call at the office. Why? Because I can have the documented call, I can have that I put notes down, I can have that they called me, and this is just from a lawyer standpoint. Same thing with nurse practitioners. It's okay, we're here to help people, and we can talk about this, especially in this forum, we can talk and share ideas. But when you have a patient just calling you, you know the type that they're going to call and ask for more information. They just don't want to do that copay. They just don't want to come in, and they want to get all this information. The thing is, they're going to hold you responsible for those communications. Prescriptions to friends and family. 10 years ago, things were a lot different. If you had a friend or family member, I would advise have them come in and see your collaborating doctor, keep that barrier. Now, even with that, I say be careful and send them on to another doctor. Why? Because the board now, they really haven't ratcheted down and said it's illegal or, but violation, but they frown on it. You've read on that. They frown on it. And why? Because you're blurring the line. Even if you're getting your doctor to write the script for your mother, it's kind of like the doctor's feeling in a way, well, if I don't write the script for the mom, maybe she's not going to see that 31st patient today that I needed seeing, or maybe she might quit on me. It blurs the lines, or he may quit on me. It blurs the lines. So it's always best to just say, look, and always the friends and family, you can never have a decent meal. They're always wanting to talk about their hemorrhoids and their thyroid and feel my chain and lymph. I mean, you never get a break, right? So you have to have your boundaries and say, look, I'm out of work. Come see me at the clinic. Or no, let me think about that again. If you're my family member, don't come see me at the clinic. Here's somebody really good that I know. Why can't you see me? And I'll say, well, because I might lose my license. That's the quick, fast answer. You don't want me to lose my license. Then I'm going to be hitting you up for money. Oh, no, it's okay, you know. Yeah. Then you're going to have to support me. So crimes and convictions, okay? We have a list of crimes that are pretty much absolute, like the matrix is what they call it. You know, what is the matrix, you know? The matrix is a bunch of crimes. This morning I used an example of a guy who is a nurse, LVN, studying to be RN, had a bad breakup. He still had the key to the apartment. He goes in there anyway. Weeks later, she says he didn't have consent. She said, I'm going to ruin you. She sure did. She filed, and the district attorney overzealously, in my opinion, overcharged it instead of trespassing, a burglary. He's a week before taking his finals. He has to decide between jail and taking his finals. He takes a plea so he can get out, and then he finds out that a deferred adjudication, he can't sit for his RN boards, and he had to stay out for about 3 years. So because he had to battle between choosing that. So there are, in that section, list of crimes, and on the matrix itself, it also says which ones are absolutes. Felonies, I've seen people come back from felonies, but it's very hard. Usually you're looking at 3 to 5 years. And depending on the type, if it's a sexual crime, if it's a crime of violence or aggravated, you might have to hang it up. And this pill mill case that we're looking at, you know, these types of things, they're generally saying you'll never get back your APRN. You may be able to apply for your RN. Pretty depressing after lunch, I'm sorry. Okay, possible barriers to licensure and fitness to practice. Okay, these are the ones that I was talking about. Murder? Maybe. Yeah. You know, but it depends. Did your husband deserve it? No, I'm just kidding. Dave, cut that out. No, just kidding. Leave that in. That's good. Okay, sexual assault, of course, registered sex offender. You know, when they think about this, when you're an APRN, if you're lucky enough to maybe 5 years later get something with this, still Medicaid, CMS, and insurance carriers are want to know if you can participate. And these are like absolute bans, especially like healthcare fraud and stuff like that. They're going to say, no way. So these are like the biggies. Even my wife's got a provider company. Even with providers, you know, these are hard and fast rules. Even with a controlled substance, you've got to look at the time that passed, and you have to look if it's deferred or pre-trial. But these are pretty much the biggies that are precluders from. So I'm giving you this as a perspective as we're building up for our. What we're doing is we're kind of giving a perspective because we're building up for our APRN, getting ready for either informal conference or a state office of administrative hearing, and we'll get to that in a minute. But lying, cheating, and stealing is pretty much not cool. They will treat the lie worse than the offense. They will, drug-related actions or conduct, you get a lot of mercy on those. I've thrown a really good case. You know, the hatchet guy this morning, I used the example of the guy with a hatchet, and then he had a DWI, and then he had a pot possession, and we walk in there, and in the morning I walk in, and this poor guy, you know, I mean, shirt untucked, hadn't shaved, you know, luckily I had my, I had an extra razor, I had my suitcase, and I said, dude, go shave, go in the back. We're literally there at the nursing board. I go in there and tuck in your shirt and take a shave. I said, I don't have a jacket for you. You're skinnier than me, but go in there and clean up. You look a mess. So he goes in there, and we're having the informal conference. You're going to learn what that is. There's nothing informal about an informal conference. They just make it sound nice. Well, he walks in there, and I mean, if they had knives and a noose, they were like, yeah, we're going to get this guy, you know? And they were like a hatchet, cocaine. You took a lie detector test that admitted to going with prostitutes. You're a disgusting human being, you know? And so I was going, you're right. And so he's like nudging me. I go, shut up, be quiet. And I was talking to him because they're around the table, and I said, everything you all have said is correct about him. And they go, yeah, they were feeling good about it. And I said, on paper, But I said, there's a disconnect. He's an excellent dialysis nurse. I've brought like 20 references from coworkers and patients. When he gets out of work, this guy's out of control. He drinks, you know, he's violent. He attacked a man who was cheating with his wife in flagrante. If you don't know what that means, look it up. That means caught in the act. And he stabs him with a hatchet in the chest. They wanted to, but when I told him that and I showed him all that and I said, I asked myself, my dad died of renal failure, and I said, would I let this guy dialyze my father? I said, absolutely not. And he started judging me again. I said, shut up, shut up. And I said, on paper, but look at everything they put on there. It's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of guy. By the time we got out of there, they ended up feeling good about giving him probation. And he kept his license because he had a good attorney that got him a misdemeanor assault on the hatchet. And probation on prostitution, the pot, he was misdemeanor guy, right? Got to keep it, and he's practicing to this day, and he's a darn good nurse. But he walks the straight and narrow. They're watching him, you know. But I said, if I can help get a hatchet guy off, maybe I can help you. And that's a true story, you know, but it's all the way you bring it to him, and it depends on the panel you have that day. It depends. Justice is on the judge. I'm sorry, I'll say it on tape, on video, the internet, the world. It depends on the judge you have that day sometimes. It depends on the panel. It depends on the politics. It depends on how they're feeling about Lord Tab today. Maybe tomorrow they'll say, you know what, Lord Tab's good. And the politicians go, yeah, Lord Tab's good. And we're like, oh, man. Yesterday he said it was bad. You know, now we could give Lord Tab, you know. So the unlawful practice, drug-related things, and like I said, the lie is worse. If you get arrested, they will respect you more. I have a lady lost a thumb drive, okay? And it wasn't encrypted. I said, tell them about it right away. You know what? That mitigates and brings down the temperature really fast. Show them that you sent out letters to your patients. Show them that you're apologetic. Show them all this. You may have to pay some fines, but you keep your license. The decision-making model, I always like to go by this. Is the activity consistent with the MPA rules you're about to do? Can you do it? Is the activity appropriately authorized by valid order? And do you have policies and procedures? Is the act you're about to do supported by either research reported in nursing and health-related literature, or are you just doing snake oil? You know, weight loss clinics, you know, I don't want to pick on them, but they go out there, you know, not everybody needs insulin, you know, for their weight loss and all that. And, you know, these are some of those that they really targeted those a few years ago. These weight loss clinics, they said you're giving the same treatment to everybody. They're doing the same thing with the pill mills. You're giving the same sort of cocktail to the same pain people, and that's wrong. Do you personally possess current clinical competence to perform the task? Would a reasonable and prudent nurse, that's such a lawyer term, but it's just how they put it, reasonable and prudent nurse, a sane nurse, I like to say, perform this activity in the setting? Are you prepared to assume the accountability for the provision of safe care and the outcome? Main things here are follow-up. So many people that get in trouble with the board will do the activity. Yeah, it meets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but did they follow up? So many don't follow up with the patient. So many don't follow up and say, hey, how are you doing? A couple of days, because they get busy. But we can't get busy enough that we don't follow up, especially with those that have too much to lose. The homeless, the elderly with cognition problems. These are the people that we have to watch out for. Relevant regulations, I've given you those, and I know your eyes are going to blur over. Just know they're there. You can email me. I'll send them over. I don't expect you to remember all of this. I don't remember all of these subchapter H30135. I only use this stuff when I want to sound smart. You know, I'll have a cheat sheet and go, well, under section F 301.251, you know, and they're going, and what does that mean? Hold on, let me check. License requirements, you know. Yeah, you just want to sound like you're smart. You know, these are the, like on, you know, like on a white blood count, the aha values. When you go, the MCV is like, aha, you know. Yeah, those are the aha values. Okay, you know, shift to the left. What does that mean again? I don't remember. Brief break to digest the info. Okay, so we know the basics. Running a little fast, but we'll take a little break here in a minute. But we know the basics, right? I just did a quick RN overview. Get in the mood of being on the board. Get in the mood of being the lawyer for the person being accused by the board, and we don't know where we're going to be. Whoever you feel like you want to be. If you want the challenge of being on the defense team, join me. If you want to nail her, join them. Think how to get her out of this. You know, we know how they're going to punish her. Revocation, suspension, maybe never APRN again, maybe never RN again, maybe never LVN again. But think how to protect the public and prove she's an imminent danger if you're on the BON team. And think the opposite if you're the defense team. But also think about the civil, criminal, and administrative trouble she's in all of this. Because you have to really, as an APRN, what I want you all to do when you get out there is to start thinking in terms of globally, like we do with our patients and diagnosis. We're not just treating the diabetes. We're looking at the third spacing. We're looking to see arcus senilis. We're looking to see, let me show your tongue, let me see your teeth. You know, I always tell people, we don't look at enough teeth. You know, I say it's like buying a good horse. My dad used to say, look at the teeth and look at the ankles, you know. And I'd say, well, maybe he's right with patients, you know. We don't look at the dentition. What happens when we don't floss enough? You know how I get guys to floss? I said, I just read a study that it causes erectile dysfunction. You've never seen so many guys running out to go buy floss. And the ladies are thankful they don't have bad breath, you know. So I say, floss and don't have erectile dysfunction. And I said, plus it's not just for your heart that's bad. Once you're having an erectile dysfunction, you took me to that one over there. Mr. Rollins, Boston Scientific did it and said 5 years before you have heart problems, if you have erectile dysfunction, that's kind of telling you if your little vessels are bad, your big vessels are going to be worse in 5 years. See? So we're looking at things in terms of that. So when somebody comes in, a man comes in or a woman comes in, we're not just looking at their diabetes, we're looking at them globally. So zoom back and say, where's this guy headed with this? He has ADHD? A little bit. But I'm telling you that's the way lawyers do. Same thing. Think like a lawyer. We're looking at it. If you're a good lawyer, you've got to look at civil, criminal, and administrative, just like we look at things holistically. We look at it from the law holistically. If you go to a lawyer who says, yeah, take the deal, it's good. Yeah, and you have to ask him, well, how many times have you been to the board? Well, never, but I got a guy that I send referrals to. I said, well, you never been to Austin? No, that's not the guy to hire, right? He may be a great car wreck lawyer, but he may not be the one for you to go to the board. And this is a very specialized, you don't know how many lawyers I've talked to go, oh yeah, I've been to that board thing, it's easy, it's Mickey Mouse, administrative law, it's not real law. And I'll tell you it's harder than real law, because I can act boisterous, I can act this and that, I can advocate, I can pound on the table a little bit, I can push the envelope for my client in civil and criminal, I can act outraged. In front of the board giveth and the board taketh away. You walk in there with cap in hand and you use politics. You use good persuasive skills. You don't go in there and demand your client's license back. I'm not going to go in there for poor Pat Smith and say, you guys are stupid if you don't give her back her license. She's a really good practitioner. They go, no, you're stupid, and she's revoked, and you guys, security? No, we're going to go in there and say, respectfully, we want to show you other side of Pat Smith, and we have these. So we have to think about, if we're going to represent her, we have to think about, and we can do this together, and we can do for the board together. We have to think of ways to defend her. So we want to take a little break, contemplate, think about ways to nail her and get her off the hook. That's basically what it is. It's because we're looking at 7,000 scripts over a couple of years, and we're looking at a doctor who's turned on her, and an MA who said that it was like Candyland in there, land of the sweets in that pill mill that she had. That's what he's saying to save his neck from going to jail, because he had a record. So, and then we have a 78-year-old who has cancer, doesn't want to spend the last 2 years in prison, which is a death sentence for him. So she's left on the hook, and we have to see how are we going to defend the public. And honestly, I've been in the situation where I've had a client where I'll say, maybe you ought to voluntarily kind of give some concessions. Because I say, are you really a nurse that cares? I've seen people that are impaired that I'd say, are you really, maybe you really need help, And they've voluntarily done stuff, and the board likes that. If you go in there with really heads, some people will say, you know, I realize I have a problem. I realize I did unsafe practice. I'm willing to own it. And that's what they really want to hear. That's what they like, is to hear mitigating circumstances and admitting that you accept some fault, because they know that we have a very hard job. So let's take a break and think about it. If you all have questions, I'm right here for you.